The sun hung low over Redemption Creek, casting long shadows across the dusty Main Street as Xavier Zanders leaned against the saloon's weathered post, a wanted poster with his face staring back at him from the opposite building. $5,000 for the man who'd emptied the Prosperity Bank's safe 3 years prior. $5,000 for a desperate act he'd committed when the drought had claimed his father's cattle and creditors threatened to take everything else. Redemption Creek had changed in the years he'd been gone. New storefronts lined the widened street, and the population had nearly doubled. Xavier pulled his hat lower, obscuring his face as he surveyed the town. At 30 years old, he hoped his now fuller beard might conceal his identity long enough to see his sister before moving on. She'd written that she was teaching at the schoolhouse now, the only piece of home he had left. "Excuse me," came a soft voice from behind him. Xavier turned to find a young woman holding several books to her chest, her auburn hair catching the last rays of sunlight. "You're blocking the boardwalk." "My apologies, madam," Xavier said, stepping aside with a slight bow. He noted the schoolbooks in her arms. "You wouldn't happen to be the schoolteacher," the woman smiled, revealing a slight dimple in her left cheek. "One of them. I'm Olivia Dawson. I teach the younger children." Xavier's heart stuttered. This wasn't his sister. "A pleasure, Miss Dawson. I'm looking for Elizabeth Zanders." "I believe she teaches here as well." Olivia's bright expression dimmed. "You're a friend of Lizzie's, her brother," Xavier clarified, watching as recognition dawned in Olivia's eyes. "Xavier," she whispered, glancing around quickly. "You shouldn't be here." "Sheriff Miller has your poster hanging in his office." Xavier stiffened. "I need to see my sister. Is she well?" "She's been ill," Olivia said, her voice dropping further. "Consumption. The doctor has her resting at home. She can't teach anymore." The news hit Xavier like a physical blow. "Where is she staying?" "With me at my house on the edge of town." Olivia hesitated. "You can't just walk through Redemption Creek. Someone will recognize you." "I'll find a way," Xavier assured her, though uncertainty gnawed at his insides. "Which house is yours?" "The small blue one beyond the schoolhouse." "But listen," she added, touching his sleeve lightly. "The roof of the schoolhouse collapsed in yesterday's storm. The children have nowhere to learn. If you want to stay hidden for a while, perhaps you could help with repairs." No one looks too closely at workers. Xavier considered the proposition. Working in plain sight seemed dangerous, but it might provide the cover he needed while he figured out how to help Elizabeth. "I'm handy with tools," he said finally. "I'll be there at dawn." Olivia smiled, relieved. "Thank you. Come to the back door of my house tonight after sunset. You can see Elizabeth then." As she walked away, Xavier couldn't help but notice the graceful way she moved, her skirts swishing gently against the boardwalk. He'd expected to find his sister and leave immediately, but fate seemed to have other plans for him in Redemption Creek. The night air carried the scent of pine as Xavier approached the small blue house at the edge of town. He'd circled widely around Redemption Creek, avoiding the more populated areas where someone might recognize him. A single lantern burned in the window, a beacon guiding him through the darkness. He knocked softly on the back door, 3 measured raps. It opened almost immediately, revealing Olivia in a simple calico dress, her hair freed from the tight bun she'd worn earlier. "You came," she whispered, relief evident in her voice. She stepped aside, allowing him to enter a warm kitchen with a pot of stew simmering on the stove. "Where is she?" Xavier asked, removing his hat and running a hand through his hair. "This way." Olivia led him down a short hallway to a small bedroom. She opened the door gently, revealing a thin figure beneath quilts, illuminated by a single candle. "Lizzie." Xavier moved to his sister's bedside, kneeling beside her. In the 3 years since he'd seen her, Elizabeth Zanders had become a shadow of herself. Her once plump cheeks were hollow, her breathing labored. Elizabeth's eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to disbelief, and then joy. "Xavier, is it really you?" "It's me, little sister," he confirmed, taking her frail hand in his. "I got your letters. I came as soon as I could." Elizabeth struggled to sit up, but Xavier gently pressed her back. "Don't strain yourself. I'm not going anywhere." "But the law doesn't matter," he interrupted. "You're what matters now." "I'll give you two some privacy," Olivia said from the doorway, slipping away silently. Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want to worry you, but I'm afraid I don't have much time left, Xavier." "Nonsense," Xavier said firmly, though his heart clenched at the rasping sound of her breathing. "We'll get you the best doctor. I have some money saved." "Dr. Mitchell has done all he can," Elizabeth interrupted. "What I need now is for you to be careful. Sheriff Miller talks about catching you like it's his life's mission." Xavier squeezed her hand. "I'll be careful. Miss Dawson suggested I help repair the schoolhouse roof, said no one looks too closely at workers." "Olivia is a good person," Elizabeth said with a small smile. "She took me in when I couldn't manage on my own anymore, refused to let me pay a cent in rent." "She seems kind," Xavier agreed, thinking of the young teacher's warm eyes. "She's more than kind," Elizabeth said. "She's been reading to me every night. Brings fresh flowers from my room even though wildflowers are scarce this time of year." She paused for a coughing fit that shook her thin frame. "Promise me you'll be careful, Xavier. I couldn't bear it if you were caught because of me." "I promise," he said, though they both knew some promises were beyond keeping. "Now rest. I'll come see you tomorrow night." When Xavier returned to the kitchen, Olivia was ladling stew into a bowl. "You must be hungry," she said, placing it on the table. "Please eat." Xavier sat, suddenly aware of how long it had been since his last proper meal. "Thank you for taking care of my sister." "She's a dear friend," Olivia said, sitting across from him. "When she became too ill to teach, I couldn't bear the thought of her being alone." Xavier took a spoonful of stew, savoring the rich flavors. "This is delicious. My mother's recipe," Olivia explained. "Venison stew with wild herbs. It was the only thing Elizabeth would eat last week." "How bad is it?" Xavier asked, setting down his spoon. "Truly." Olivia met his gaze, her honesty refreshing in a world where Xavier had grown accustomed to lies and half-truths. "Dr. Mitchell says she might have a few months. The consumption has taken a strong hold." Xavier nodded, absorbing the news. "Then I have a few months to make things right." "The schoolhouse needs fixing," Olivia said. "The town council won't spare the money for proper repairs. They say it's not in the budget until next spring. And the children, for now, we're teaching in the church when it's available. Other days under the big oak near the creek. But with winter coming." She shrugged helplessly. Xavier considered this as he ate. "I'll fix your roof, Miss Dawson. Consider it payment for your kindness to my sister." "Please call me Olivia," she said with a small smile. "And where will you stay?" "You can't very well sleep at the saloon with your face on wanted posters." "I've slept under the stars more nights than I can count," Xavier assured her. Olivia shook her head. "There's a small shed behind the schoolhouse. It's not much, but it has a cot and a stove. The previous teacher used it as an office in warmer months." "That would be perfect," Xavier said, genuinely grateful. "I'll start on the roof at first light." Olivia studied him, her hazel eyes thoughtful. "Why did you rob that bank, Mr. Zanders?" The question caught him off guard, but something in her direct gaze compelled honesty. "Drought killed our cattle. Bank was foreclosing on our ranch. My father died of a heart attack the week before, and I had Elizabeth to think about." He paused, memories flooding back. "I was desperate and foolish. Thought I could save what was left of our home." "Did you hurt anyone?" No, Xavier said firmly. I waited until closing. Only the banker was there and I didn't harm him. Just took what the bank had taken from dozens of families during that drought. Olivia nodded, seemingly satisfied. The shed key is hanging by the back door of the schoolhouse. Tools are inside. She stood, gathering his empty bowl. You should go now before it gets too late. People might wonder why my lamps are burning so long. Xavier rose, placing his hat back on his head. Thank you, Olivia, for everything. Dawn comes early, Mr. Zanders, she said with a small smile. I suggest you get some rest. As Xavier slipped back into the night, he found himself thinking not only of his ailing sister, but of the schoolteacher with honest eyes who had offered help to a wanted man. The schoolhouse stood as a testament to better days, its weathered clapboards bearing the marks of countless seasons. In the pale light of dawn, Xavier assessed the damage to the roof. A large section over the main classroom had collapsed entirely, while other areas sagged dangerously. The recent storm had merely been the final blow to an already deteriorating structure. Xavier found the key exactly where Olivia had said it would be, hanging on a nail by the back door. The shed was small but tidy, with a narrow cot against one wall and a pot-bellied stove in the corner. A workbench ran along the opposite wall, tools arranged neatly above it. It would do just fine. After stowing his meager belongings, Xavier gathered what tools he'd need for the day's work. The rising sun cast long shadows across the schoolyard as he dragged a ladder to the side of the building and began removing the damaged shingles. By mid-morning, the September sun beat down relentlessly. Xavier had stripped to his undershirt, his back already reddening under the heat. He was so focused on his work that he didn't notice the approaching footsteps until a voice called up to him. You've made good progress already. Olivia stood at the bottom of the ladder, shielding her eyes from the sun as she looked up at him. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair neatly pinned beneath a straw hat. In one hand, she held a cloth-covered basket. Damage is worse than it looked from below, Xavier reported, climbing down to join her. Whole section of rafters has rotted through. They'll need replacing before any new shingles go on. I suspected as much, Olivia sighed. The town council has neglected this building for years. They seem to think education is a luxury rather than a necessity. Xavier wiped sweat from his brow with his forearm. I can fix it, but I'll need lumber, more than what's in your shed. I thought you might, Olivia said, offering him the basket. I've brought you some breakfast and a list of what we can afford. Mr. Johnson at the lumberyard owes me a favor. He'll deliver what we need without asking too many questions. Xavier accepted the basket, caught off guard by her thoroughness. You've thought of everything. I've been trying to get this roof fixed for months, Olivia admitted. The previous handyman took our deposit and disappeared. Xavier opened the cloth to find freshly baked biscuits, a jar of preserves, and a canteen of cool water. His stomach rumbled in appreciation. This is mighty kind of you. It's practical, Olivia corrected, though a smile played at her lips. Can't have you fainting from hunger on my roof. Xavier chuckled. No danger of that, Miss Dawson. He took a biscuit, savoring the buttery taste. How is Elizabeth this morning? Resting comfortably, Olivia assured him. I read to her before leaving. She seems stronger today. May I ask what you're reading to her? Pride and Prejudice, Olivia said. Elizabeth claims it's helping her improve her accent for teaching elocution, but I suspect she simply enjoys the romance. Xavier smiled at that. His sister had always been a dreamer. I appreciate you letting me see her last night. It means more than I can say. She lights up when she speaks of you, Olivia said, though she worries constantly about your safety. As I worry about her health, Xavier replied, sobering. He glanced back at the damaged roof. I should get back to work. Would you thank Mr. Johnson for me when you see him? Tell him I'll need those rafters by tomorrow if possible." "Of course," Olivia said, turning to leave. "Oh, and Xavier, try to remember you're supposed to be just a handyman. The less attention you draw to yourself, the better." "Yes, madam," he agreed with a slight bow that made her laugh. As she walked away, Xavier found himself watching her longer than was proper. There was something about Olivia Dawson that intrigued him, a quiet strength beneath her gentle exterior. She was nothing like the women he'd encountered in his years on the run, women with hard edges and cynical smiles. Shaking himself from his thoughts, Xavier returned to the roof. He had work to do, a sister to care for, and a price on his head. Daydreaming about a schoolteacher was a luxury he couldn't afford. The first interruption came shortly before noon when a man on horseback stopped to watch Xavier work. He was middle-aged, with a star pinned to his vest that made Xavier's pulse quicken. "Don't believe I've seen you around Redemption Creek before," the man called up, his hand resting casually near his holstered revolver. Xavier tipped his hat respectfully, keeping his face partially shadowed. "Just passing through, Sheriff. Miss Dawson hired me to fix her roof." "That's so." The sheriff studied him. "Got a name, stranger?" "Tom Wilson," Xavier lied smoothly, using an alias he'd adopted before. "From up Laramie way." "Awful long way from home," Xavier shrugged. "Work takes me where it's needed." The sheriff seemed ready to ask more questions when Olivia appeared from around the corner of the schoolhouse. "Sheriff Miller," she greeted him cheerfully. "I see you've met Mr. Wilson. Isn't it fortunate he was passing through? The children have been without their schoolhouse for too long." Sheriff Miller touched his hat respectfully. "Miss Dawson, town council finally approved the repairs, did they?" "Not exactly," Olivia admitted. "I'm paying for it myself. Couldn't bear to see another season pass with the children learning outdoors." The sheriff frowned. "That's not right. Council should be handling this." "Perhaps you could mention that at the next meeting," Olivia suggested with a sweet smile that Xavier suspected had charmed more than one town official into cooperation. "I'll do that," Miller promised. He cast one more suspicious glance at Xavier before adding, "You let me know if you need anything, Miss Dawson." "I appreciate that, Sheriff," Olivia said, watching as the lawman rode away. When he was out of earshot, Xavier exhaled slowly. "That was close." "He's suspicious by nature," Olivia said, climbing a few steps up the ladder to speak more privately. "Be careful around him. Sheriff Miller has been after the Prosperity Bank robber since it happened. It's personal for him. The banker was his brother-in-law." Xavier's stomach dropped. "You didn't mention that. Would it have changed your decision to help your sister?" When Xavier didn't answer, Olivia continued, "I thought not. Just be cautious, Xavier, and perhaps consider growing that beard a bit fuller." With that advice, she descended the ladder and headed back toward town, presumably to arrange the lumber delivery. Xavier watched her go, newfound respect mingling with concern. Olivia Dawson was risking a great deal by harboring him, even if she didn't know the full extent of his crimes. The lumber arrived the following morning, delivered by a gruff man who barely spoke 2 words to Xavier. The quality was better than he'd expected, sturdy pine boards that would support the schoolhouse roof for years to come. Xavier worked methodically, removing the damaged rafters and cutting new ones to size. By midday, he'd made significant progress, though the September heat slowed his efforts. Children occasionally gathered to watch him work, their curious faces turning up toward the roof as they whispered among themselves. Xavier kept his hat low, and his responses to their questions brief but friendly. One boy in particular, about 10 years old with a shock of red hair, seemed especially fascinated by the construction process. "Mister, how come you ain't using no nails on them rafters?" the boy called up. Xavier demonstrated the joinery technique he was employing. "This way's stronger. Nails can work loose over time, but a good joint like this will hold for decades. Could you teach me to do that sometime?" the boy asked eagerly. "Tommy Cooper, stop bothering Mr. Wilson," came Olivia's voice as she approached with several other children in tow. "He has important work to do." "I ain't bothering him, Miss Dawson," Tommy protested. "I'm learning." Olivia's stern expression softened. "Well, perhaps Mr. Wilson wouldn't mind if you observed quietly after school hours. For now, though, we have arithmetic waiting beneath the oak tree." The children groaned collectively, making Xavier smile. Some things never changed. He disliked arithmetic as much as these children clearly did. As the group moved away, Olivia lingered briefly. "Elizabeth asked for you this morning. She seems stronger today." "I'll come by after sundown," Xavier promised, warmth spreading through his chest at the good news. "Sheriff Miller came by the house," Olivia added in a lower voice. "Asked about you, about Mr. Wilson, wanted to know where you were staying." Xavier tensed. "What did you tell him?" "That you'd found lodging at Widow Parker's boarding house," Olivia said with a small smile. "The widow is quite hard of hearing and rarely remembers her boarders' names, so he's unlikely to verify the information too closely." "Clever," Xavier acknowledged, impressed by her quick thinking. "Just be careful," Olivia warned. "The sheriff doesn't trust strangers, especially men who appear suddenly with useful skills." With that cryptic advice, she hurried after her students, leaving Xavier to ponder how a schoolteacher had become so adept at misdirection. That evening, after the sun had dipped below the horizon, Xavier made his way to Olivia's small house. He moved carefully through the shadows, avoiding the main roads where he might be recognized. The lantern in Olivia's kitchen window guided him to her back door, where he knocked softly. Elizabeth was sitting up in bed when Xavier entered her room, color in her cheeks for the first time since his arrival. "You look like a proper working man," she teased, noting his sawdust-covered clothes. "Feel like one too," Xavier admitted, taking a seat beside her bed. "How are you feeling today?" "Better," Elizabeth said, though the word ended in a small cough. "Olivia's been making me drink this horrible tea with honey and lemon, but it seems to help." "Then you should keep drinking it," Xavier advised, taking her hand. It felt less fragile today, her grip stronger. "Tell me about the roof," Elizabeth requested. "My students have been writing me notes about the mysterious handyman." Xavier chuckled. "Hardly mysterious, just trying to keep to myself. Tommy Cooper says you're teaching him carpentry techniques." "He's a bright boy," Xavier said. "Reminds me a bit of myself at that age, always wanting to know how things work." Elizabeth smiled. "You've always been good with children. You should have been a teacher instead of." She trailed off. "Instead of a bank robber," Xavier finished softly. Elizabeth squeezed his hand. "That's not who you are, Xavier. It's something you did, not who you are." "The law doesn't make that distinction," he reminded her. "Perhaps not," came Olivia's voice from the doorway. She carried a tray with tea and bread. "But people can change, and communities can forgive." Xavier stood to help her with the tray. "Not all crimes are forgiven, Miss Dawson. Please, it's Olivia. And I believe most actions can be understood, if not forgiven, when we know the whole story." She poured tea into 3 cups. "Elizabeth has told me about your father, about losing the ranch." Xavier accepted the cup she offered, their fingers brushing briefly. "Did she tell you I'd planned to return the money, that I never meant it to be permanent?" "No," Olivia said, her eyes widening slightly. "She didn't mention that part. The money was just to save the ranch," Xavier explained. "I'd planned to work it for a year, get back on my feet, then anonymously return what I'd taken. But things—" He sighed deeply. "Things didn't go as planned." "What happened?" Olivia asked softly. Posse caught up with me before I even made it home with the money, Xavier said, the memory still bitter. I barely escaped with my life, lost most of the money in the river crossing. What little I saved, I sent to Elizabeth over the years when I could. Elizabeth nodded confirmation. He made sure I could finish school, become a teacher. Olivia seemed to digest this information, her expression thoughtful. So you've been on the run for 3 years, sending what little you had to your sister while living as. She gestured to his worn clothes. As whatever work I could find, Xavier finished. Ranch hand mostly, some carpentry. Kept moving whenever I heard rumors of lawmen asking questions. A silence fell over the room, broken only by the ticking of the small clock on Elizabeth's bedside table. Finally, Olivia spoke. "The roof will be finished by the end of the week at your current pace," she observed. "What will you do then, Xavier?" It was a question he'd been avoiding. "Move on, I suppose. Can't risk staying in one place too long." "But Elizabeth will be in your capable hands," Xavier finished. "I'll send money when I can for her care." Elizabeth's face fell. "I had hoped, with you being here." Xavier took his sister's hand again. "I wish I could stay, Lizzie, but it's too dangerous for all of us." Olivia set down her teacup with unusual force. "That's ridiculous. Your sister needs you here." "I'm a wanted man," Xavier reminded her. "Yes, for a crime you committed to save your family, from which you kept only enough to help your sister's education." Olivia's eyes flashed with unexpected passion. "Surely there must be a way to resolve this that doesn't involve you disappearing again." Xavier was taken aback by her vehemence. "Unless you know a sympathetic judge willing to overlook bank robbery, I don't see how." "Perhaps not a judge," Olivia said slowly, an idea clearly forming. "But what if the victim were to withdraw the complaint, Mr. Franklin?" "The banker," Xavier shook his head. "He's the sheriff's brother-in-law. He'd never, he might," Olivia insisted. "Mr. Franklin isn't the hard man people think. His own son nearly lost their farm in '74 during another drought. He understands desperate circumstances." Xavier stared at her, hope warring with skepticism. "Even if that were true, how would you propose approaching him?" "Excuse me, sir. Remember that man who robbed your bank? He'd like to apologize and hopes you'll forgive him." "Something like that," Olivia said, unperturbed by his sarcasm, "though perhaps with more tact." Elizabeth laughed, then coughed. "Oh, Xavier, you haven't experienced Olivia's persuasive abilities yet. The town council once voted unanimously against a new schoolhouse roof. She changed their minds in one afternoon." "This is different," Xavier protested. "This is a federal crime." "Let me try," Olivia urged. "What do you have to lose?" Xavier looked between the two women, one his beloved sister and the other a near stranger who had already risked so much to help them. "My freedom, potentially. My life, possibly. Or you could gain everything," Olivia countered softly. "A chance to stop running. To be with your sister when she needs you most." Put that way, Xavier found he couldn't refuse. "What would this plan of yours entail?" Olivia smiled triumphantly. "Let me speak with Mr. Franklin first, feel out his position, then if he seems receptive we can arrange a private meeting." "And if he's not receptive?" "Then you'll be no worse off than you are now," Olivia pointed out pragmatically. "You can still disappear before anyone else knows you were here." Xavier exhaled slowly. "Very well, but promise me you'll be careful. I wouldn't want you implicated if things go poorly." "I promise," Olivia said solemnly. "Now, Elizabeth needs her rest and you have a roof to finish in the morning." As Xavier bid his sister good night and followed Olivia back to the kitchen, he found himself wondering at the strange turn his life had taken. He'd come to Redemption Creek expecting a brief, secretive visit with his sister before continuing his solitary existence. Instead, he'd found himself employed, housed, and now potentially on the path to redemption, all because of a determined schoolteacher with surprising depths. "Thank you," he said simply as they reached the back door. Olivia looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the lantern light. "Don't thank me yet, Xavier Zanders. I haven't accomplished anything." "You've given me hope," he countered. "That's no small thing for a man who's been without it for 3 years. Something shifted in her expression, a softening around her eyes. "Hope is the most powerful force in the world. It can rebuild roofs, heal illnesses, and perhaps even mend past mistakes." As Xavier stepped back into the night, he carried her words with him, a small flame of possibility warming the cold reality of his situation. Over the next few days, Xavier threw himself into his work on the schoolhouse roof with renewed determination. The structure was taking shape nicely, with new rafters supporting freshly laid shingles. He worked from dawn until dusk, stopping only when his body demanded rest or when curious children gathered to watch his progress. Tommy Cooper had become a regular visitor after school hours, eagerly fetching tools and learning basic carpentry techniques. Xavier found he enjoyed teaching the boy, whose quick mind and nimble fingers suggested a natural aptitude for the trade. "My pa says I gotta be a farmer like him," Tommy confided one afternoon as he helped sort nails. "Says carpentry ain't reliable work." "It served me well enough," Xavier replied, carefully measuring a board. "But your father's not wrong. Farming feeds people. That's honorable work." "I guess," Tommy conceded, unconvinced. "But I'd rather build things that last, like this roof. You said it'll be here for decades, right?" Xavier nodded, sawing the board to its proper length. "If it's maintained properly, yes." "That means part of you stays here, even when you go away," Tommy observed with surprising insight. "That's something special." The comment struck Xavier deeply. He'd never thought of his work in those terms, as a legacy that outlasted his presence. His life had been transient for so long, marked by brief connections and swift departures. The idea of leaving something permanent behind was both foreign and appealing. "It is something special," Xavier agreed quietly. "But so is growing food that nourishes people. Different kinds of lasting contributions, that's all." Tommy seemed to consider this. "Maybe I could do both, farm in the growing season and build in the winter." "That sounds like a fine plan to me," Xavier said, ruffling the boy's red hair. "Now hand me those shorter nails. We've got a ridge beam to secure before sundown." As they worked together, Xavier found himself imagining a different life, one where he might stay in Redemption Creek, perhaps open a carpentry shop, teach apprentices like Tommy. It was a dangerous fantasy, he knew. His future hinged entirely on Olivia's mysterious plan, and whether the banker would be amenable to forgiveness. Speaking of Olivia, she appeared at the schoolhouse just as Xavier and Tommy were cleaning up for the day. She wore a dress Xavier hadn't seen before, a deep green that complemented her auburn hair, and carried a small basket. "Tommy Cooper, your mother's been looking for you," she admonished, though her tone was gentle. "She needs help with the younger children before supper." Tommy groaned but obediently gathered his things. "See you tomorrow, Mr. Wilson?" he asked hopefully. "I'll be here," Xavier confirmed. "We've still got the western section to finish." As Tommy raced off toward home, Olivia approached Xavier with a mixture of excitement and caution in her expression. "I spoke with Mr. Franklin today." Xavier's heart jumped. "And he's willing to meet with you," Olivia said, her voice low despite the empty schoolyard. "Tomorrow evening at his home. His wife will be visiting her sister, so you'll have privacy." Xavier struggled to believe what he was hearing. "He knows who I am. What I did, he knows," Olivia confirmed. "I told him everything about your father's death, the drought, your plans to return the money." He listened carefully. And he's willing to hear me out, just like that. Xavier couldn't keep the skepticism from his voice. Not just like that, Olivia admitted. I may have reminded him about certain financial arrangements he made during the drought that weren't entirely above reproach. Foreclosures that happened with suspicious speed, loans denied to families that had banked with him for generations. Xavier stared at her, astonished. You blackmailed him. I merely suggested that many in town might view your actions differently if they understood the full context, Olivia corrected primly. And that, as a Christian man, forgiveness might benefit his standing both in the community and with the Almighty. A laugh escaped Xavier before he could stop it. Miss Dawson, you are a force to be reckoned with. Olivia smiled, pleased by the compliment. I'm a teacher, Mr. Zanders. We become quite adept at persuasion when school budgets are involved. She offered him the basket she carried. Fresh bread and some stew. Elizabeth insisted you needed a proper meal. Xavier accepted the basket gratefully. How is she today? Better than yesterday, Olivia reported. She sat in the garden for nearly an hour this afternoon. Dr. Mitchell visited and seemed pleased with her progress. Relief washed over Xavier. That's wonderful news. Yes, it is, Olivia agreed. She hesitated, then added, I believe having you here has improved her spirits immeasurably. Hope is a powerful medicine. You mentioned that before, Xavier recalled, about hope being the most powerful force. My father used to say it, Olivia explained. He was a minister before he died, believed firmly that hope could accomplish what nothing else could. He sounds like a wise man. He was, Olivia said softly. He would have understood why you did what you did. And he would have approved of your desire to make it right. Their eyes met, and Xavier felt something shift between them, a deepening connection that went beyond their initial circumstances. In the golden light of late afternoon, Olivia Dawson was more than just his sister's friend or a helpful schoolteacher. She was becoming someone whose good opinion mattered to him, whose smile could brighten even the most uncertain of days. I should go check on Elizabeth, Olivia said, breaking the moment. Will you come by later, after I clean up? Xavier promised. And Olivia, thank you for arranging this meeting. Whatever comes of it, I'm grateful. Save your gratitude for after tomorrow, she advised pragmatically, though her eyes were warm. We don't know yet how Mr. Franklin will respond when face to face with the man who emptied his safe. As she walked away, Xavier found himself truly hoping for the first time in years that tomorrow might mark the beginning of a new chapter in his life. One where he was no longer defined by a single desperate act, but by the man he aspired to be. The following day dawned clear and cool, a perfect September morning for roofing work. Xavier arrived at the schoolhouse earlier than usual, eager to make progress before his evening meeting with the banker. He worked methodically, installing shingles in neat, overlapping rows that would keep the schoolroom dry for years to come. By mid-afternoon, the western section was nearly complete. Xavier paused to survey his work, satisfaction warming his chest. The new roof was sturdy and well-crafted, a testament to skills honed through years of itinerant labor. Looks mighty fine, came a gravelly voice from below. Xavier tensed, recognizing Sheriff Miller's distinctive drawl. He turned slowly to find the lawman studying the roof with apparent approval. Thank you, Sheriff, Xavier replied, keeping his tone neutral. Should be finished by week's end. Miss Dawson speaks highly of your work, Miller commented, squinting up at him. Says you're the most competent handyman she's encountered in years. Xavier tipped his hat in acknowledgement of the compliment. She's been very kind. Thing is, the sheriff continued, shifting his weight, I checked with Widow Parker. Says she ain't got no boarder matching your description. Xavier's blood ran cold, but he maintained his composure. There must be some confusion. I've been staying in her garden shed. Less expensive that way." Miller's eyes narrowed. "That's so. Funny, 'cause the widow says her garden shed's been locked up since spring, full of preserves for winter." Xavier set down his hammer carefully, calculating his chances of outrunning the sheriff if it came to that. "Perhaps I misspoke. It's the old root cellar I've been using." "Mr. Wilson, if that is your name, I suggest you come down from there so we can continue this conversation properly," Miller said, his hand moving to rest on his holstered revolver. Xavier was contemplating his limited options when a female voice called out, "Sheriff Miller, what perfect timing!" Olivia hurried across the schoolyard, her arms full of books and papers. She looked flustered but determined. "I was just on my way to find you." Miller turned, momentarily distracted. "Miss Dawson, is something wrong?" "Not wrong exactly," Olivia said breathlessly. "But Mr. Johnson at the lumberyard insists I need a permit for these schoolhouse repairs. Says it's a town ordinance. I told him that was ridiculous since it's an emergency repair, but he's being quite stubborn about it." The sheriff frowned. "Johnson's right about the ordinance, but wrong about enforcement. Emergency repairs don't need prior approval." "That's exactly what I thought," Olivia exclaimed. "Would you mind speaking with him? He's at his yard now, and I've got 20 children waiting for their arithmetic lesson." Miller hesitated, glancing back at Xavier. "I was just having a conversation with your handyman here." "Oh, it can wait, surely," Olivia pleaded. "The children can't continue learning outdoors much longer. The weather's turning colder." Xavier held his breath as the sheriff deliberated. Finally, Miller nodded reluctantly. "All right, Miss Dawson, I'll speak with Johnson, but," he added, looking up at Xavier, "I'll be back to finish our chat." "I'm much obliged, Sheriff," Olivia said warmly. "You're a true public servant." Miller tipped his hat, cast one more suspicious glance at Xavier, and then strode off toward town. As soon as he was out of earshot, Olivia's pleasant expression shifted to urgency. "He knows," she said simply. Xavier descended the ladder quickly. "How much?" "Enough to be suspicious," Olivia replied. "Someone must have recognized you. The meeting with Mr. Franklin needs to happen now, not this evening." "Is he available?" "He's at the bank until 5 o'clock, Olivia said. "But there's a back entrance through the alley. I can take you there." Xavier hesitated. "If Miller returns and finds us both gone, he'll be occupied with Mr. Johnson for at least an hour," Olivia assured him. "I arranged for a rather significant discrepancy in the lumber invoice that will require careful review." Despite the seriousness of the situation, Xavier couldn't help but smile. "Remind me never to underestimate you, Miss Dawson." "A lesson many have learned too late," she replied with a quick grin. "Now come, we don't have much time." They moved swiftly through back alleys, avoiding the main street where they might be observed. Olivia led with surprising confidence, navigating the less traveled paths of Redemption Creek like someone accustomed to discretion. The bank's rear entrance was unmarked, a simple door set into a brick wall. Olivia knocked in a specific pattern 3 quick raps, followed by 2 slower ones. After a moment, the door opened to reveal a middle-aged man with thinning hair and wire-rimmed spectacles. "Miss Dawson," he greeted her, his eyes immediately moving to Xavier. Recognition and something like caution crossed his features. "This is him then, Mr. Franklin. This is Xavier Zanders," Olivia confirmed. "We've had to advance our meeting. Sheriff Miller is becoming suspicious." Franklin stepped back, allowing them entry into what appeared to be his private office. "I suspected this might happen. Miller's been obsessed with catching the Prosperity Bank robber for years." Xavier removed his hat as he entered, feeling strangely formal in the presence of the man whose bank he'd robbed. "Mr. Franklin, I appreciate your willingness to meet with me." Franklin gestured to a pair of chairs before his desk. "Miss Dawson can be quite persuasive when she believes in a cause. Please sit." As they settled into their seats, Xavier studied the banker. William Franklin was not what he'd expected. Instead of the hard-eyed businessman he remembered from 3 years ago, this man looked tired and careworn, his shoulders slightly stooped beneath his tailored suit. "I won't waste time with pleasantries, Mr. Zanders," Franklin began, folding his hands on his desk. "You robbed my bank of $5,000 3 years ago. That money was never recovered." "No, sir," Xavier admitted. "Most was lost during my escape. What little remained I sent to my sister for her education and care." Franklin nodded. "So Miss Dawson explained. She also mentioned your intention had been to return the money eventually." "Yes, sir, that was my plan, misguided as it might have been." "Misguided indeed," Franklin agreed dryly, "but perhaps understandable given the circumstances." He removed his spectacles, cleaning them methodically with a handkerchief. "Your father's ranch was one of many that failed that year. The rocking Z had been in our family for 3 generations," Xavier said quietly. "It wasn't just land to my father, it was his legacy." Franklin replaced his glasses. "I made many difficult decisions during that drought, Mr. Zanders. Some I stand by, others." He sighed heavily. "Others haunt me still." Xavier leaned forward slightly. "Sir, your father came to me 3 times seeking an extension on his loan," Franklin explained. "The 3rd time was the day before he died. I refused him, despite knowing him to be an honorable man who had always paid his debts. The bank's investors were pressing me to clean up the books." He paused. "I sometimes wonder if my refusal contributed to his heart failure." The admission stunned Xavier. He'd carried anger toward this man for years, blaming him in part for his father's death. To hear Franklin express regret was unexpected. "Miss Dawson suggested that perhaps there's a way forward that doesn't involve the law," Franklin continued when Xavier remained silent. "A way that might allow you to stop running and make amends properly." Hope flickered in Xavier's chest. "I'm listening, sir." "The money you took is gone," Franklin stated, "but the harm done extends beyond mere dollars. There's the matter of public trust, of demonstrating that actions have consequences." "I understand," Xavier said solemnly. "I'm prepared to face those consequences." Franklin shook his head. "Not through imprisonment, Mr. Zanders. That serves no one. I propose instead that you work to repay the community you harmed." "How would that work?" Olivia asked, speaking for the first time since introductions. "The schoolhouse repairs are a start," Franklin said. "But there's more needed in Redemption Creek. The church steeple was damaged in last winter's storms. The town hall needs extensive work. The orphanage at the edge of town is practically falling down." He looked directly at Xavier. "I propose that you stay in Redemption Creek, using your clearly considerable skills to repair these buildings, as repayment for what you took." Xavier blinked in surprise. "You're suggesting I work off my debt?" "Precisely," Franklin confirmed. "At a fair wage, most of which would go toward restitution, with enough left for your basic needs. It would likely take several years to fully repay the amount." "And the law?" Xavier asked cautiously. "Sheriff Miller," Franklin steepled his fingers. "As the victim of the crime, I have significant influence over whether charges are pursued. If I were to inform the sheriff that you had approached me voluntarily, confessed, and agreed to make full restitution through community service, well, it wouldn't erase the crime, but it might convince him that justice could be served without a prison sentence." Xavier could hardly believe what he was hearing. "Why would you do this, Mr. Franklin? After what I did?" The banker was silent for a long moment. Because Miss Dawson reminded me of something I'd forgotten in my years of balancing ledgers, that the true measure of a community is how it treats those who have made mistakes. He paused. And because I carry my own regrets about that terrible drought year. Olivia reached over and squeezed Xavier's hand briefly. It's a chance, Xavier. A real chance. Xavier looked from her hopeful face to Franklin's expectant one. I accept your offer, Mr. Franklin, with profound gratitude. Don't thank me yet, Franklin warned. Convincing Miller won't be easy. He takes the law very seriously, and he's been hunting you for years. When should we speak with him? Xavier asked. No time like the present, came a voice from the doorway. All three turned to find Sheriff Miller standing there, his revolver drawn but pointed at the floor. His expression was a mixture of triumph and confusion. Been looking for you a long time, Zanders, he said. Never expected to find you in William's office having a civilized conversation. Xavier slowly raised his hands. Sheriff Miller, it's not what you think. Really? Miller's eyebrows rose. Because it looks to me like a bank robber, a schoolteacher, and a banker having some kind of secret meeting. Curious combination. Franklin stood. Put the gun away, James. Mr. Zanders is here at my invitation. Miller's eyes narrowed. Your invitation. William, this man stole $5,000 from your bank. I'm well aware, Franklin said calmly, and he's here to make restitution. Restitution, Miller repeated incredulously. He's a wanted criminal. He's also a skilled craftsman who's already begun repaying his debt to this community, Olivia interjected. Have you seen the schoolhouse roof? Children will be learning in a dry classroom again because of him. Miller seemed taken aback by her vehemence. Miss Dawson, with all due respect, this isn't a matter of carpentry. It's about the law. The law exists to serve justice, Franklin said, moving around his desk to stand beside Xavier. Tell me, James, what justice is served by sending this man to prison? The money is gone, most of it lost in the river. What he managed to save went to his sister's care. Would imprisonment restore a single dollar to the bank's coffers? Miller hesitated, his gun hand lowering slightly. It's the principle of the thing, William. A man can't just take what he wants because times are hard. No, he can't, Xavier agreed, surprising everyone by speaking. What I did was wrong, Sheriff. I was desperate and grieving, but that's no excuse. I'm not asking for forgiveness just for the chance to make it right. And how exactly do you propose to do that? Miller demanded. Franklin explained the arrangement he'd proposed, years of dedicated work at minimal pay to restore what had been taken. As he spoke, Miller's expression gradually shifted from skepticism to thoughtful consideration. You'd vouch for him, Miller finally asked Franklin. After what he did, I would, Franklin confirmed. And I'd withdraw the complaint officially. Miller holstered his revolver, his weathered face troubled. It's not that simple. There's still a federal warrant, which can be addressed if the original complainant withdraws charges and attests that full restitution has been arranged, Franklin countered. I've already consulted the territorial judge on the matter, hypothetically, of course. Miller looked between the three of them, clearly wrestling with his decision. Your sister's the schoolteacher who's been ill, he said finally to Xavier. Elizabeth Zanders, Xavier nodded. Yes, sir. She's the reason I came back to Redemption Creek. Something in Miller's expression softened slightly. My wife thinks highly of her, says she's the best teacher this town's ever had. She is, Olivia agreed fervently, and having her brother here has improved her health noticeably. Miller removed his hat, running a hand through his graying hair. This is highly irregular. So is life, James, Franklin said with unexpected warmth. Sometimes justice requires more imagination than strict adherence to procedure. A long silence filled the room as the sheriff considered. Xavier held his breath, acutely aware that his entire future hung on this man's decision. Finally, Miller sighed deeply. "I want your word, Zanders. Your solemn oath that you'll abide by William's terms, that you'll work honestly to repay what you took." "You have it, Sheriff," Xavier said without hesitation. "I swear on my father's grave." Miller nodded once, decisively. "Then I'll speak to Judge Harmon tomorrow. If and only if he agrees to this arrangement, I'll consider the matter resolved from the county's perspective." Relief washed over Xavier, so powerful he nearly staggered. "Thank you, Sheriff." "Don't thank me," Miller growled. "Thank these two." He gestured to Franklin and Olivia. "Never seen such a determined pair of advocates. Made me feel like I was the criminal for doing my job." Olivia smiled sweetly. "We merely presented an alternative perspective, Sheriff." Miller snorted. "Alternative perspective? That what they're calling it these days?" He shook his head. "I'll expect you all at my office tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock sharp. We'll formalize this arrangement in writing." With that, he replaced his hat and departed, leaving the three of them in stunned silence. "Did that actually just happen?" Xavier finally asked. Franklin chuckled. "It appears so, though I must say I didn't expect Miller to find us quite so quickly." "He must have seen through my distraction with the lumberyard," Olivia mused. "He's sharper than I gave him credit for." "Or someone saw us coming here," Xavier suggested. "Redemption Creek isn't so large that two people can move completely unnoticed." "Regardless," Franklin said, "the outcome is promising. Judge Harmon is a practical man. If I present this as a matter of restitution rather than punishment, I believe he'll approve our arrangement." Xavier turned to Olivia, who was watching him with shining eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," he said quietly. "Both of you." "Live up to your promise," Franklin replied simply. "Become the man your father would have been proud to call son." As they left the bank, taking care to use the front entrance this time since secrecy was no longer necessary, Xavier felt lighter than he had in years. The prospect of staying in Redemption Creek, of being near Elizabeth during her illness, of continuing his work on buildings that needed his skills, it was more than he had dared to hope for. "I should return to my students," Olivia said as they reached the town square. "They're probably wondering where their arithmetic lesson has gone." "Wait," Xavier said, catching her hand impulsively. "What you did today, what you've done since I arrived, it's extraordinary. Why would you risk so much for someone you barely know?" Olivia looked down at their joined hands, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "I know enough," she said softly. "I know you're devoted to your sister. I know you're skilled and hardworking. I know you regret your mistakes and wish to make amends." She met his gaze. "What more does one need to know about a person's character?" Xavier was struck by the simple wisdom of her words. In a world that had often judged him solely by his worst act, Olivia Dawson had looked deeper, seeing possibilities where others saw only a criminal. "Besides," she added with a small smile, "Elizabeth thinks very highly of you. Her judgment has always been excellent." Xavier chuckled. "She thinks highly of you as well, says you're the kindest person she's ever known." "Kindness costs little and yields much," Olivia replied. "My father taught me that. Your father was a wise man." "Yes," Olivia agreed, gently withdrawing her hand. "He would have liked you, I think." With that surprising statement, she turned and headed toward the schoolhouse, calling over her shoulder, "Don't forget to finish that western section before sundown." Xavier watched her go, a new emotion expanding in his chest. It felt suspiciously like belonging, like the first tentative roots of a future he hadn't allowed himself to imagine. That evening, Xavier shared the news with Elizabeth. Her joy manifested in a brightness to her eyes that had been missing for too long. "You're staying," she confirmed, clutching his hand. Truly staying, if Judge Harmon approves the arrangement, yes, Xavier said, not wanting to promise too much too soon. It seems I'll be Redemption Creek's official repairman for the foreseeable future. Elizabeth laughed, the sound dissolving into a small cough. Oh, Xavier, this is better than I dared hope, to have you here not looking over your shoulder constantly. It doesn't erase what I did, Xavier cautioned. There will still be those who remember who don't trust me. But they'll have the chance to see the real you, Elizabeth insisted. The brother I've always known, honorable, hardworking, kind. Xavier smiled at her unwavering faith in him. We'll see. For now, I'm just grateful for the chance. He hesitated, then added, Olivia was remarkable today. Standing up to the sheriff, arranging everything. I've never met anyone quite like her. A knowing look crossed Elizabeth's pale features. She is special, isn't she? Xavier recognized the matchmaking tone in his sister's voice. Lizzie, don't start. The woman helped a known criminal avoid arrest. That doesn't mean she has any personal interest in me. If you say so, Elizabeth replied with exaggerated innocence. Though I've never seen Olivia fight so passionately for any other cause, and I've known her for 2 years. Xavier changed the subject, unwilling to examine the hope her words kindled. Dr. Mitchell says you're improving. The color in your cheeks is better. Elizabeth allowed the diversion. He seems cautiously optimistic. Says if I continue to improve, I might even be able to teach again by spring part-time at least. That's wonderful news, Xavier said sincerely. The children miss you. Tommy Cooper asks about you nearly every day. Tommy is a dear boy, Elizabeth said fondly. Brightest student I've ever taught. How is he doing with arithmetic? As they fell into comfortable conversation about Elizabeth's students and Xavier's progress on the roof, the reality of his new situation began to settle in. For the first time in 3 years, he was planning beyond tomorrow, imagining a life measured in seasons rather than in quick escapes and anonymous towns. The following morning, Xavier arrived at the sheriff's office precisely at 9. Franklin was already there, deep in conversation with Miller and an older man Xavier assumed must be Judge Harmon. Olivia arrived moments later, slightly breathless, having left her students with an assistant for the morning. The judge was a stern-looking man with a shock of white hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to evaluate Xavier's worth in a single glance. So you're the bank robber who's become our town carpenter, he said without preamble. Yes, Your Honor, Xavier replied, standing straight and meeting the judge's gaze directly. Judge Harmon Fed. Franklin here tells me you're willing to work off your debt over time, that you've already started with the schoolhouse roof. That's correct, sir. And why should I believe you won't disappear the moment I agree to this irregular arrangement? It was a fair question. Xavier considered his answer carefully. Because my sister needs me, Your Honor, and because I'm tired of running from my mistake, I want to make it right. The judge studied him for a long moment. Mr. Franklin is willing to withdraw his complaint. Sheriff Miller, against what I suspect is his better judgment, is willing to support this arrangement. He paused. Miss Dawson has also spoken eloquently on your behalf, attesting to your character and work ethic. Xavier glanced at Olivia, who gave him a small, encouraging nod. I've drawn up terms, the judge continued, sliding a document across the desk. You'll work primarily on public buildings in need of repair, with your wages going predominantly toward restitution. You'll report weekly to Sheriff Miller. You'll remain within the county boundaries unless given explicit permission to travel. Any violation of these terms will result in immediate revival of all charges. Is that clear? Xavier scanned the document quickly. The terms were strict but fair. Yes, Your Honor, perfectly clear. Then sign, Judge Harmon instructed, offering a pen. Xavier signed his name with a steady hand, feeling the weight of the moment. He was no longer a fugitive but a man working to redeem himself in the eyes of the law and the community. After the others had added their signatures as witnesses, Judge Harmon rolled up the document and handed it to Sheriff Miller. "It's done. Mr. Zanders is now officially in the county's employ as restitution for his crime." He fixed Xavier with a stern look. "Don't make me regret this decision, young man." "I won't, Your Honor," Xavier promised solemnly. As they exited the sheriff's office, Franklin shook Xavier's hand firmly. "A new beginning, Mr. Zanders. Make the most of it." "I intend to, sir," Xavier assured him. "And thank you for your forgiveness and your advocacy." Franklin nodded once before departing for his bank, leaving Xavier with Olivia on the boardwalk outside the sheriff's office. "I should return to my students," Olivia said, though she made no move to leave. "And I have a roof to finish," Xavier replied, similarly stationary. They stood for a moment in companionable silence, watching the town go about its morning business, shopkeepers sweeping their storefronts, wagon deliveries arriving at the general store, children playing hoops in a side alley. "It's strange," Xavier said finally. "A week ago, I couldn't have imagined standing openly in the middle of Redemption Creek without fear of arrest. A week ago, I couldn't have imagined blackmailing a banker or arguing with a judge," Olivia countered with a small laugh. "You're full of surprises, Miss Dawson. As are you, Mr. Zanders." She turned to face him fully. "I meant what I said to the judge about your character. The way you've worked on that roof, taught Tommy Cooper, cared for your sister. Those actions reveal more about you than one desperate mistake." Xavier was moved by her faith in him. "I hope to prove worthy of your good opinion." "I believe you will," Olivia said simply. She glanced toward the schoolhouse. "I really should go. 20 children and long division await me." "May I call on you properly sometime?" Xavier asked suddenly. "Not to discuss Elizabeth or roofing or my legal situation, just to talk." Olivia's cheeks colored slightly. "I would like that very much." As she walked away, Xavier felt a profound sense of possibility unfurling before him, not just the chance to repay his debt, but the opportunity to build something new and lasting in Redemption Creek. The weeks that followed took on a rhythm unlike anything Xavier had known in his years on the run. Each morning, he rose before dawn in the small shed behind the schoolhouse, which he had gradually transformed into a comfortable living space. By the time the sun touched the eastern horizon, he was already at work on whatever repair project demanded his attention that day. The schoolhouse roof was completed first, earning him a small celebration from Olivia's students when they returned to their proper classroom. Tommy Cooper had proudly announced to anyone who would listen that he had helped Mr. Wilson with the rafters, a claim Xavier good-naturedly confirmed. From there, Xavier moved on to the church steeple, the town hall's sagging porch, and various other projects around Redemption Creek. Each Friday, he reported to Sheriff Miller, who noted his progress with increasingly less suspicion. Each evening, he visited Elizabeth, whose health continued to improve gradually under Olivia's care, and with the peace of mind that came from having her brother nearby. And twice a week, on Wednesday evenings and Sunday afternoons, Xavier called on Olivia Dawson. Their courtship, if it could be called that, progressed with the careful deliberation of two people who had learned the value of patience. They walked together along Redemption Creek's quieter paths, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for their futures. Xavier told her about the ranch he'd grown up on, about his father's patient teachings and his mother's early death. Olivia spoke of her childhood as a minister's daughter, of her passion for education, and of the brother she'd lost in the war. On a particularly fine October afternoon, they sat together on a blanket beneath a cottonwood tree, watching golden leaves spiral down around them. "Elizabeth seems stronger every day," Olivia observed. "Dr. Mitchell says her improvement is remarkable." "I believe it's your nursing as much as his medicine," Xavier replied, "and perhaps having some peace of mind about my situation." Olivia smiled. "She's certainly happier. She's even talking about teaching again in the spring, perhaps just the younger children at first." "That would be wonderful," Xavier said sincerely. His sister's passion for teaching was matched only by Olivia's, and he knew how much Elizabeth missed her students. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, enjoying the crisp autumn air and each other's company. Xavier found himself studying Olivia's profile, the gentle curve of her nose, the way her hair caught the sunlight, the slight furrow that appeared between her brows when she was thinking deeply. "Penny, for your thoughts," he asked finally. Olivia turned to him with an unexpected vulnerability in her expression. "I was wondering what happens when your debt is repaid." Xavier blinked in surprise. "What do you mean?" "According to Mr. Franklin's calculations, you should complete your restitution in about 3 years," Olivia explained. "After that, you'll be free to go wherever you choose." Understanding dawned. "You think I'll leave Redemption Creek, won't you?" Olivia asked softly. "You've spoken of Texas, of California, places where a man with your skills could build a prosperous life." Xavier reached for her hand, entwining their fingers. "Olivia, I've spent 3 years drifting from place to place, never putting down roots because I couldn't. Now that I can." He paused, searching for the right words. "Redemption Creek has become more than just the place where I'm working off my debt. It's becoming home." "Because of Elizabeth," Olivia said, though her tone suggested a question. "Because of Elizabeth," Xavier confirmed. "And because of a certain schoolteacher who saw beyond my worst mistake and gave me a chance at redemption." He squeezed her hand gently. "I'm not going anywhere, Olivia, not unless you come with me." Her eyes widened. "Xavier, I'm not proposing marriage, not yet," he clarified quickly. "That would be presumptuous, given my circumstances, but I want you to know that my feelings for you are sincere and deepening every day." Olivia's face softened into a smile that made his heart stutter. "Mine as well," she admitted, "though I've tried to be sensible about it." "Sensible?" Xavier chuckled. "Like when you blackmailed a banker and argued with a judge on behalf of a known criminal." "That was different," Olivia protested, though her eyes sparkled with amusement. "That was about justice." "And this?" Xavier asked, lifting their joined hands. Olivia considered for a moment. "This is about hope," she said finally. "Hope for a future neither of us expected." Xavier leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. When she didn't, he pressed his lips to hers in a gentle kiss there first. It was brief but perfect, a promise of deeper connection to come. As autumn deepened into winter, Xavier's position in Redemption Creek gradually shifted from that bank robber working off his debt to the town's master carpenter. His craftsmanship spoke for itself, and even those who had initially viewed him with suspicion began to grudgingly acknowledge his value to the community. The orphanage at the edge of town became his primary project as the weather turned colder. The building had been neglected for years, its windows drafty, its roof leaking in multiple places. The 10 children who lived there with their caretaker, a widow named Mrs. Bennett, had been suffering through increasingly difficult winters. Xavier threw himself into the work with particular dedication, often staying late into the evening to ensure that no child would feel the bite of winter wind through cracks in the walls. Olivia frequently joined him after school, helping with smaller tasks and bringing hot meals for him and the orphans. "You have a special affection for this place," Olivia observed one evening as they installed new window frames together. Xavier nodded, measuring carefully before making his cut. My father was orphaned young. Told me once that the coldest he'd ever been was in the county orphanage where he grew up. Said he could see his breath inside the dormitory at night. Olivia passed him a nail. So this is for him. In a way, Xavier acknowledged. And for these children. No one should have to be cold in their own home. Across the room, Tommy Cooper was carefully showing two younger boys how to apply putty around a window pane, mimicking the techniques Xavier had taught him. The boy had become a regular helper on Xavier's projects, his natural aptitude for carpentry blossoming under proper instruction. "Tommy has quite a gift," Olivia remarked, following Xavier's gaze. "Have you spoken with his father about apprenticing him?" Xavier smiled ruefully. "3 times. Mr. Cooper remains convinced that farming is Tommy's only sensible future. Perhaps he'll change his mind when he sees how skillful Tommy's becoming," Olivia suggested. "The boy repaired the schoolhouse bookshelf yesterday without any help from you." "Did he now?" Xavier felt a surge of pride. "I didn't know that," he said, and I quote, "Mr. Wilson taught me proper joinery, Miss Dawson. This shelf will outlast us all." Olivia laughed softly. "He admires you tremendously." The notion of being a role model still felt strange to Xavier after years of hiding his identity. "I'll speak with Mr. Cooper again after the harvest is in," he decided. Perhaps a formal apprenticeship could be arranged, with farm work during growing seasons as his father wishes. As they worked side by side into the evening, Xavier found himself increasingly aware of how natural it felt to have Olivia nearby, to discuss the day's events and make plans for tomorrow. He'd never envisioned domestic contentment for himself, had never thought it possible given his circumstances. Now, it seemed tantalizingly within reach. Christmas arrived with a heavy snowfall that transformed Redemption Creek into a pristine wonderland. The completed orphanage stood warm and secure against winter's assault, its windows glowing with lamplight as the children prepared for their first truly comfortable Christmas in years. Xavier had been invited to Christmas dinner at Olivia's home, where Elizabeth was now well enough to help with simpler cooking tasks. He arrived bearing gifts, a hand-carved jewelry box for Olivia with intricate floral designs, and a small writing desk for Elizabeth that could be used from her bed on days when her strength failed her. The women's delight at his offerings warmed Xavier more than the crackling fire in Olivia's hearth. They, in turn, presented him with a new set of chisels and a winter coat they had saved to purchase together. "This is too fine for a working man," Xavier protested, running his hand over the wool coat's soft lining. "Nonsense," Elizabeth declared. "Every man needs one good coat, especially one who works outdoors through the winter." "Besides," Olivia added with a smile, "the town council voted to increase your stipend last week. Mr. Franklin says your work has already saved Redemption Creek considerable money in future repairs." "Is that so?" Xavier was genuinely surprised. Though his primary wages went toward his restitution, he received a small stipend for living expenses. An increase, however modest, was unexpected. "It is," Elizabeth confirmed. "Sheriff Miller himself made the motion." That was perhaps the most surprising news of all. Miller had been scrupulously fair in their weekly meetings, but Xavier had never mistaken the lawman's professional courtesy for personal warmth. Their Christmas dinner was simple but delicious: a small roast chicken, potatoes, carrots from Olivia's root cellar, and apple pie for dessert. As they ate, Elizabeth regaled them with stories of her student's Christmas pageant, which she had been well enough to attend the previous evening. "Tommy Cooper made an excellent Joseph," she reported, though he did inform Pastor Williams that the manger's construction was historically inaccurate. Xavier laughed heartily. "That sounds like Tommy. He gets his precision from his mentor, Olivia teased. I've never seen anyone measure 3 times before cutting as you do. Measure thrice, cut once, Xavier quoted his father's old saying. Saves lumber and curses. As the evening progressed, Elizabeth retired early, leaving Xavier and Olivia alone by the fire. They sat close together on the small sofa, comfortable in each other's presence. I have another gift for you, Xavier said after a comfortable silence. One I didn't want to give you in front of Elizabeth. Olivia looked at him curiously as he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object wrapped in soft cloth. What is it? Open it, he encouraged. Olivia unwrapped the cloth to reveal a delicate wooden ring, polished to a warm glow. Xavier, it's beautiful, she breathed, examining the intricate carving. It's made from the heartwood of an old oak, Xavier explained. I've been working on it in the evenings for weeks. It's exquisite, Olivia said, turning it in her fingers. But why didn't you want to give it to me in front of Elizabeth? Xavier took a deep breath. Because it's not just a gift, it's a promise. He took her hand gently. Olivia Dawson, in the few months I've known you, you've changed my life completely. You believed in me when others saw only my mistakes. You fought for me when I had given up fighting for myself. Olivia's eyes widened as she understood what was happening. Xavier, I know it's too soon to speak of marriage, he continued earnestly. I still have my debt to repay, my reputation to rebuild. But if you're willing, I'd like this ring to be a promise between us that when the time is right, when I can offer you a life worthy of you, I will ask for your hand properly. Tears shimmered in Olivia's eyes. Xavier Zanders, are you asking to court me officially, with honorable intentions? Xavier confirmed, his heart pounding. If you'll have me. Yes, Olivia said simply, her voice steady despite her tears. Yes, I will. Xavier slipped the wooden ring onto her right hand, a promise ring, not yet an engagement. It fit perfectly, as he'd hoped it would after surreptitiously borrowing one of her gloves to measure. It's temporary, he explained, until I can afford a proper gold one. But the sentiment behind it is permanent. I love it, Olivia assured him, admiring how the firelight played across the polished wood. And I love the man who made it. The words, spoken so simply and directly, stole Xavier's breath. You do, I do, Olivia confirmed, meeting his gaze steadily. I love your dedication to your sister, your patience with Tommy Cooper, your determination to make things right. I love the way you measure 3 times and the care you take with everything you build. She touched his face gently. I love you, Xavier Zanders, bank robber and master carpenter. Xavier drew her close, overwhelmed by emotions he'd never expected to feel. I love you too, Olivia Dawson, schoolteacher and savior of wayward men. Their kiss by firelight sealed a promise that neither took lightly, a commitment to build a future together, one careful measure at a time. Spring came early to Redemption Creek, the snow melting to reveal tender green shoots pushing through the softened earth. Elizabeth's health had improved enough that she had returned to teaching part-time, sharing duties with Olivia in an arrangement that suited them both. Xavier had moved beyond public buildings to accepting private commissions from townspeople who had come to respect his craftsmanship. Sheriff Miller had reduced their meetings to monthly check-ins, a sign of growing trust. The bank robbery that had defined Xavier for so long was gradually becoming a footnote rather than the headline of his life. On a warm May evening, Xavier and Olivia walked hand in hand along the creek that gave the town its name. Wildflowers dotted the banks and birdsong filled the air with nature's own music. I received a letter today, Olivia said as they paused to watch the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and amber. From the Territorial Education Office. Xavier turned to her. Good news, I hope. They've approved funding for a proper school building, Olivia said, her excitement evident. A real school, Xavier, with multiple classrooms, a library, even indoor facilities. Olivia, that's wonderful, Xavier exclaimed, genuinely thrilled for her. When will construction begin? That's the best part, Olivia said, her eyes shining. They've asked if Redemption Creek has a builder capable of undertaking the project. The council recommended you. Xavier stared at her in disbelief. Me, to build an entire school, who better? Olivia asked simply. You've already proven your skills on every public building in town. This would be your biggest project yet, but Mr. Franklin has offered to count it as the final payment of your restitution. The implications took a moment to sink in. If this counts as my final payment, then you would be free, Olivia finished softly. Your debt paid in full, your name cleared. Xavier felt lightheaded at the prospect. How long would the project take? A year, perhaps more, Olivia estimated. It would be a substantial undertaking. And after that? Xavier asked, his heart racing with possibilities. What happens when my debt is fully paid? Olivia looked up at him, her expression open and loving. That depends on you, Xavier. What do you want to happen? Xavier took both her hands in his decision made long ago. I want to stay in Redemption Creek. I want to build a carpentry shop where I can work and perhaps teach apprentices like Tommy. I want to see Elizabeth fully recovered. He paused, gathering his courage. Most of all, I want to ask you properly to be my wife, with a gold ring to replace the wooden one and the promise of a home we'll build together. Tears sparkled in Olivia's eyes. I think those sound like wonderful plans, Mr. Zanders. Is that a yes? Xavier asked, hardly daring to believe. It's a ask me properly when the time comes, Olivia replied with a smile that outshone the sunset. But you should know that my answer won't have changed. Xavier pulled her close, overwhelmed by how far he had come from that desperate day 3 years ago when he'd entered the Prosperity Bank with nothing but fear and determination. That single act, born of desperation, had set him on a path that eventually led here to this Creek Bank, this woman, this second chance at a life with meaning and purpose. Thank you, he whispered against her hair, for believing in me when I had stopped believing in myself. Olivia leaned back to look at him. That's what love does, Xavier. It sees possibilities where others see only problems. It builds bridges where others see only chasms. She touched his face gently. You taught me that with every broken thing you've fixed in this town. As they walked back toward Redemption Creek, hand in hand in the gathering twilight, Xavier reflected on the strange journey that had brought him here. A bank robbery, a desperate escape, years on the run, all leading somehow to this moment of profound grace. He had come to Redemption Creek to see his dying sister one last time. Instead, he had found healing, purpose, love, and, true to the town's name, redemption. The following spring, as wildflowers once again bloomed along the creek banks, Xavier Zanders and Olivia Dawson were married in the church whose steeple he had repaired. Elizabeth, now fully recovered and teaching full-time, stood proudly as her brother's witness. Tommy Cooper, officially apprenticed to Xavier at last, served as ring-bearer, carrying the simple gold band that would replace the wooden promise ring Olivia had worn faithfully for over a year. Sheriff Miller attended in his Sunday best, his gruff exterior softened by the occasion. Mr. Franklin gave a toast at the reception, speaking eloquently about second chances and the power of community. The new schoolhouse, nearing completion under Xavier's careful direction, stood as a testament to what was possible when judgment gave way to understanding. And if some still remembered that the town's respected carpenter had once been a desperate young man who robbed a bank, they kept such thoughts to themselves. For in Redemption Creek, as in life, It was not how a man began his story that mattered most, but how he chose to write its remaining chapters.